Outcasted OC. Viewer discretion is advised. Incoming transmission in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, it's Courtney here from the Outcasted OC Podcast and welcome to the Monday Night Raw recap. Now this was a super fun episode of Monday Night Raw to watch and review. Let's just get straight into it. So Monday Night Raw this week kicked off with Samantha Irvin welcoming main event Jey Uso to Monday Night Raw. Now this is his first episode of Monday Night Raw since being brought over and traded from SmackDown to Raw. Obviously this was an interaction that they had with Cody Rhodes, who now has brought main event Jey Uso over to Monday Night Raw to keep him away from the bloodline and to keep him in WWE. Crowd goes absolutely insane for Jey. Jey's new entrance is that he comes from the top of the arena all the way down through the crowd into the ring. He starts to cut a promo and he said he's always wanted to do this part and he welcomes everybody to Monday Night Raw. There's some really loud Uso chants coming from the crowd and he says he's aware he's been gone for 2 to 3 weeks, but it feels like a lot longer. He said he's hit his breaking point when he's been fighting with his family, but Cody called me. And we're going to start calling these main event Mondays now. And he goes ahead and he says he knows he's done some things in the past that were wrong, and he knows that he's done a lot that has rubbed people up the wrong way. But if people have anything to say, they know where to find him. Sami Zayn's music hits and he comes on out, and there's some massive Uso chants coming from the crowd. Now, if you know where the Uso chant origin was, it was originally with the bloodline when Sami was saying, Jey's not feeling very Uso at the moment. And Sami starts by saying, it's crazy to see you here. One thing that's true is a lot of people in the locker room will have a problem with you being here. And he goes ahead and says, Kevin Owens and I haven't always seen eye to eye on this entire situation, but he's not here tonight. And he says, right now this is between me and you, and first person on Monday Night Raw, I want to be the first person to say that I'm happy that you're here. And he says, I know what's in your heart and I know your struggles and you've broken free from the chambers of the bloodline. And he said that you truly are main event Jey Uso. And he says, I know we've got history and I don't expect us to be friends overnight, but I just want you to know that I am proud of you. And Sami goes in for a handshake and there's like a whole lot of hug it out chants coming from the crowd. And then Jey kind of doesn't really want to do anything, so Sami starts to walk away. And then Jey kind of has this realization moment and he goes, hey Sami, that wasn't very Uso of me, was it? And then they come back together in the middle and they hug in the ring and the entire arena just goes absolutely nuts. So it's really cool to see that Jey and Sami are somewhat aligning again. Whether or not we'll see an in-ring partnership or behind-the-scenes partnership, that's still to be determined. Drew McIntyre's music hits, and as they're kind of leaving the ring and going back out to Gorilla, Drew McIntyre kind of looks at Jey Uso and they kind of have a bit of a stare down, but Sami goes in to kind of break it up and he's like, it's his first day here, just leave him alone, it's his first day. And then Matt Riddle comes out and the exact same thing happens, and Sami's trying to be a good friend, it's like, it's his first day, leave him alone, it's his first day. Now obviously both of these men have had issues with the bloodline, so seeing them on the flagship show with Monday Night Raw would be very hard for them, considering Jey Uso hasn't really been away from the bloodline for very long and hasn't had a chance to actually right his wrongs, if that makes sense. Then we see a video recap of Seth versus Shinsuke Nakamura from Payback. Now, there was a digital exclusive that happened after the main event where I think Seth Rollins was trying to leave and then Shinsuke sneak attacks him. So this goes back to the whole idea of, Seth won the match, but Shinsuke was the one who got to walk out of the arena. So Shinsuke goes ahead and says, Seth, I have broken you like the code that we shared, and I underestimated your hold on the World Heavyweight Championship. I was left standing on the battlefield, not you. I am the reason you will release your grip on the World Heavyweight Championship. I will prevail. I will become the World Heavyweight Champion. Then we see that Adam Pearce is backstage having a chat with Ricochet, and Ricochet saying to him, I know that you saw what happened at SummerSlam, and I know that you know that it didn't go my way, and I'm really looking for some new opportunities. Adam Pearce responds with, yep, I'm working on it, but out of the corner of his eye, he can see that Seth Rollins is at Monday Night Raw, and he walks over and he's like, Seth, what are you doing here? And Seth goes, it's Monday Night Raw, I'm the World Heavyweight Championship, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And Adam Pearce goes ahead and says, Medical has ordered you not to be here tonight. Tensions are high. Jey Uso's looming around, and he's kind of a bit frazzled, and, Seth goes ahead and says, Jey Uso, Smooso, Adam Pearce, I'm fine, like, I'm totally good. And then Ricochet comes to him and goes, sorry, Seth, I don't mean to interrupt, and I saw the match at Payback and you guys tore the house down. Respect to you for being here after what Shinsuke did to you and what you've gone through. You don't have to carry the whole show alone, though. You do have help. And Seth's trying to tell Adam and Ricochet, I'm fine, I'm totally fine, even though we kind of know that he's not. Then we go into the tag match between Drew McIntyre and Matt Riddle versus the Viking Raiders. Now, this was a really good match from the very start. Lots of good sequences at the very beginning. Drew hits a really nice spine buster. The Raiders end up double teaming Riddle. Drew does that move where he goes in with a hug with Riddle, and Riddle's really excited but then gets tossed over the ropes. Riddle grabs the table, then we hit the commercial break. So after the commercial break, the Raiders have set Riddle up on that table that Riddle had got ready from the very beginning. Then Ivar climbs up and Drew attacks Ivar. So Ivar's gone up to the side of the ring and then Drew attacks him. Riddle and Drew end up superplexing Ivar, and then before that happens, Eric moves the table so that Ivar doesn't get that impact along the table. Drew ends up tackling Ivar and hits a belly-to-belly on Eric, which was quite cool to see. Ivar ends up splashing Drew McIntyre off the commentator's table, and the Viking Raiders setting up Ragnarok when Kofi Kingston runs out and tries to hit a Trouble in Paradise, but ends up hitting it on Riddle instead of one of the Viking Raiders. The Viking Raiders end up throwing Kofi into Drew and then putting Riddle through the table, so the Viking Raiders ended up coming away with the win on this one. Now, if we remember back to last week, Xavier Woods was the one who was wrongfully injured by Drew McIntyre. Now, that was a mistake. In this moment, it's Matt Riddle being wrongfully injured by Kofi Kingston, which is quite interesting to see how they're doing that. Then throughout the night, we are seeing video packages that have been made for the Intercontinental Championship. Now, this will be main eventing Monday Night Raw this week, but we're getting a sprinkle of video packages throughout the entire of Monday Night Raw, which are showing all the different Intercontinental Champions of all time. So we're getting the likes of Seth Rollins, Pedro Morales, Edge, Triple H, Kofi Kingston, Cody Rhodes, the list goes on. So I'll briefly mention them when they come up, but I won't go into detail too much about them just because they're very quick video packages. Then Seth Rollins ends up coming out to the ring to cut a promo, and he says, welcome to Monday Night Raw. At Payback, Shinsuke Nakamura did everything that he said he would, and he didn't know if he could continue fighting at some stages during the match because of how hard Shinsuke was attacking him. And he said, but I'm still World Heavyweight Champion. But one thing that has not sat right with me since Payback is the fact that he got to walk out of there. He got to walk out of the arena, but I had to get pushed in a wheelchair by my wife. And he said, that doesn't really sit right with me. So Shinsuke, come on out now. And so Shinsuke's music hits and he comes on out and he just stands by the entrance ramps and just stares at Seth Rollins. And Seth is like, look, come on in, I've got a proposition for you. And Shinsuke's quite hesitant. And he kind of stands around for a little bit. And Seth Rollins goes ahead and says, I'll give you a World Heavyweight Championship rematch. And Shinsuke starts to kind of walk towards the ring and then ends up walking away. And Shinsuke starts chatting in Japanese. And Seth Rollins is like, look, I don't understand your natural tongue. I don't understand your language. But, I'm assuming that you are accepting my challenge. And Shinsuke goes, no. And Seth goes, excuse me? And Shinsuke goes, no. And Seth then goes, okay, so now you've got me confused. Is the match on? Is it not? And Shinsuke goes, no. And then Seth goes, no. And they start having like a no back and forth. And then Seth goes ahead and says, look, that doesn't work for me. And then Seth and Shinsuke end up brawling along the entrance ramp and the walkway. Adam Pearce and security end up running out to try and break up the brawl. Seth ends up brawling with a whole bunch of the security guys as well too, obviously because he wants to get his hands on Shinsuke Nakamura. But Ricochet ends up inserting himself and ends up pulling away Shinsuke Nakamura during this brawl, which we then end up seeing that after the commercial break there is a match set up between the two of them. Now, before this happens, we see Adam Pearce having a chat to Seth Rollins after the brawl, and Adam goes ahead and says, you are running at a pace that nobody else is in this company, and I'm just trying to prevent you from burning yourself out and from hurting yourself. I'm honestly trying to help you here. I don't get what you don't understand. And Seth is like, that doesn't work for me, man. And as soon as I heard him say that, I literally, in my mind, thought of Hulk Hogan when he was like, whenever he's like, oh, it doesn't work for me, brother. Then we had the match that was set up during the Shinsuke Nakamura Seth Rollins brawl. So the match is now between Shinsuke Nakamura and Ricochet. This is a fantastic match. These two always put on some really good matches together. Their in-ring talent combined in terms of their chemistry works really well. So Shinsuke Nakamura at the very beginning after the bell rings tries to walk out because he doesn't really want to be a part of it. But then they end up brawling in between the entrance ramp and the ring, and then Ricochet ends up flipping and chops Shinsuke. Shinsuke hits a couple of head kicks on Ricochet and then ends up following it with a knee drop on Ricochet. Shinsuke ends up kicking Ricochet's chest, which is then followed by Shinsuke hitting a sliding German suplex onto Ricochet. Then we go to commercial break. After the commercial breaks, Shinsuke ends up kicking Ricochet, but then he ends up like doing this super cool selling move where he ends up flipping. And there's a moment where Ricochet tries to end up setting Shinsuke Nakamura up for the 630, but Shinsuke rolls out and ends up hitting there's a kick sequence between the two of them. Ricochet ends up super kicking Shinsuke Nakamura, and then this is followed by Shinsuke taking Ricochet out to the timekeepers area, and Shinsuke Nakamura ends up hitting Ricochet with the chair, which ends up causing this match to be ending in a disqualification, so no kind of winner because Shinsuke used a chair when he wasn't allowed to. And then he ends up rolling Ricochet into the ring and ends up trying to wrap the chair around Ricochet's head and ends up about to set it up so he's about to stomp on it when Seth Rollins ends up running out and ends up brawling in with Shinsuke Nakamura. But then Shinsuke ends up throwing Seth Rollins into the in-ring, the outside ring steps outside of the ring. And while this is all happening, we end up actually seeing that Judgment Day during the match was watching what was happening, and then it cuts back to them watching when Seth Rollins has been thrown into the ring steps by Shinsuke Nakamura, and Damien looks really like intrigued. He's like, oh, like thinking like, should I go out there? And Rhea's like, not tonight, your time will come. Then we end up seeing a video replay of the Payback Steel Cage match. Now this was obviously the match between Becky Lynch and Trish Stratus, which resulted in Becky Lynch coming with the win, but also resulted in Zoe Stark turning on Trish Stratus after Trish got very upset by Zoe. Then we see that Jackie Redmond is backstage having a quick chat with Zoe Stark. She's basically asking, how the partnership with Trish Stratus is now and where we see it going, if they're still working together. And Zoe goes ahead and says, I've got mad respect for Trish. She's a Hall of Famer, but nobody pushes Zoe Stark. And then Shayna Baszler comes in and goes ahead and says, I kind of wish that you got rid of that dead weight a long time ago before our match. And Zoe goes ahead and says, we've got unfinished business between the two of us. Why don't we have a match together one-on-one? Shayna's like, cool, let's make it happen. After that video package backstage, we see the Judgment Day making their entrance out to the ring. Now, Judgment Day is entirely draped in gold. You've got Damien and Finn with the double strap around their neck, hanging with the titles. You've got Damien holding the briefcase. You've got Dominic Mysterio holding the North American Championship. You've got Rhea holding the Women's World Championship. The Judgment Day just looks so incredibly good, just completely draped in gold. So they end up making their way out to the ring and they all start to cut a group promo, and Damien goes ahead and says, all rise for the crew that's dripping in gold, all rise for the Judgment Day. And to be honest, Dominic Mysterio did pretty well in this, because normally in the first couple of words that Dominic says, he kind of gets booed straight out of the building, but he just kept pushing and the boos kept coming. So he said, at Payback, we did what Mommy said, we all handled our business. And Finn says, thank you. And he says, I just wanted to take a moment just to appreciate and shout out the fact that this is a 1-year anniversary of you being a part of Judgment Day, Dom. And he goes ahead and says, Rhea, thank you for always being the voice of reason. And he goes, Damien, look at us now. I know we've always had our issues, but look at us now. And he goes, I also want to shout out JD McDonough as well too, for having my back for the last 20 years. And he goes, I also want to thank myself for hitting the Grand Slam champion. And what was really cool during this moment is Finn was very much in character, but then you started getting the cheering and then you started getting the you deserve it chants, and you could see Finn had kind of not realized that was going to happen during that moment. And I was so happy when I saw he got the you deserve it chants, because I know that he didn't become the World Heavyweight Champion at SummerSlam, but just for him to now become a Grand Slam champion and to finally see him holding some gold after so long, for me, it feels very vindicating, and I'm sure it feels the exact same way for Finn Balor. So Rhea then goes ahead and says, I gave you boys an ultimatum last week, and for payback the pressure was on, but Finn and Damian, you guys rose to the occasion and you proved to everybody why we are a tight-knit family. But one thing has been bugging me. The focus is not on the Judgment Day anymore. The focus is now shifted to Jey Uso and the Bloodline. But the Bloodline has fallen, and Judgment Day is the most dominant faction in all of WWE, and you can see Rhea's getting very intense during this moment. And then JD McDonough's music hits, and Damian goes ahead and says, there was a small part of me that was actually beginning to like you. You better make your reason why you're coming out here good. And JD goes, it will be. I took a bullet for you guys at Payback. At least just give me the opportunity to explain myself. And he goes, I'm out here because Rhea said, that there are going to be big changes that are needed for Judgment Day. And they've been there for a while. And he goes ahead and says, Damian, that case has got to go. And he's holding something in his hand. And, he goes to Damian and says, the case has got to go. You've got the tag titles. You don't need this anymore. And he ends up unveiling another Money in the Bank briefcase, but instead it says Senior Money in the Bank, and it's like purple. I'll insert a picture of it here. Anyway, it is a beautiful briefcase. I swear, I wish I had have refrained on buying that one, because if I knew there was going to be a purple one coming out, I would have gotten it. But anyway, so Damian's looking really excited. He's like super stoked he's got this new briefcase, and he goes, with this case in gold. And then before he gets a chance to finish saying what he's saying, Sami Zayn's music hits, and Damian just does what everybody would do in that moment. He literally just throws the microphone. He's like, God damn it. He's like, I literally can't finish saying what I'm saying. And Sami goes, hold up. Did you really think that we would let it slide? That it took 5 of you to dethrone me and Kevin? And you're bragging when I look at you and I see 5 champ-stealing turds, which I was like, oh, okay. And he goes, there's going to be a special beating that's owed to Dominic Mysterio. What do you say? And JD steps in and goes, Dominic won't be fighting tonight. And everyone behind him's just like, huh? And he goes, he isn't the only one who screwed you over. You should fight me instead. And Sami goes, you know what? Nobody deserves it more than you. So that sets up a one-on-one match between Sami Zayn and JD McDonough, which happens later on in the evening. We then see a promo package that was cut earlier in the day by Gunther. Now this is before his Intercontinental Championship match, which is main eventing Monday Night Raw tonight. And he goes ahead and says, Chad Gable thinks that he can stand in the way of my legacy. History will be made tonight, and you will not be a part of that history. He says, your little fairy tale is temporary, but my legacy is forever. Then we see that Raquel Rodriguez is out back chatting with Adam Pearce and is kind of talking about something, and Adam's like, no, I totally agree with you. We will make that happen. And Chelsea Green comes in and is like, oh, like, manners, it's kind of rude that you're here. And they start talking about the tag team titles, and we now find out that Piper Niven is also injured. Whether or not that's just to do with a storyline or if she's genuinely injured, that's really unfortunate luck for the entire tag team division. It just goes ahead and really solidifies that they are cursed. I don't particularly think they're cursed. I just don't think they've been used very well. And then we end up finding out that obviously because Raquel Rodriguez failed at Payback, she is going to be getting a rematch with Rhea Ripley next week. But Chelsea Green doesn't know that. She kind of comes in and starts, talking poorly about Raquel, thinking Raquel's gone. But Raquel can hear it. Raquel comes back in and they end up setting a match between Raquel Rodriguez and Chelsea Green for this evening. We then have the match between Shayna Baszler and Zoe Stark. Now, I really enjoyed this match. I thought this match was really good. It was given a bit of time as well too, which I really think the ladies deserved a bit of time. So Shayna Baszler ends up shoulder tackling Zoe Stark, and then Zoe ends up hitting Shayna with a headlock takedown off a dropkick, which was a really good sequence. Shayna ends up grabbing Zoe's arm, kind of turning it round, and ends up stomping on it. And there's a couple of times where Shayna tries to go for the Karafuda clutch, but then she obviously is unsuccessful because Zoe's able to reverse it. Zoe ends up forcing Shayna into the table to break the hold, which then Zoe ends up launching over the ropes and to land on Shayna. Now, this was a pretty gnarly landing, and that takes us to the commercial break. And then Zoe ends up hitting Shayna with a suplex. Zoe ends up kicking Shayna as well too. And Zoe hits this really good sequence. It's super awesome. I highly recommend you go back and look at it. She ends up hitting a springboard into a missile drop kick, which just looks so incredibly clean. But then what ends up happening is Shayna ends up catching Zoe in the clutch, which she manages to get out of. Zoe goes for the Z360 and is caught in the clutch. And there's a few moments during it where it looks like she's trying to reverse it and it looks like she's trying to break out of the hold. But unfortunately, she is unsuccessful in breaking out of the hold for the third time, which Shayna Baszler ends up winning the match. At the very end of the match, Shayna's celebrating her win and she sees Zoe's in the corner of the ring. And she goes over to Zoe and takes her mouth guard out and says, "You gave me a better fight than Ronda did." And then Zoe goes ahead and says, you did way better than Trish would. And they end up fist pumping each other as a sign of respect, which I really enjoyed seeing that. Then we see the Judgment Day backstage in their little hangout area, and they've got all this really cool background stuff decked out. There's a picture of the four of them, which kind of resembles like a Queen album cover for me. I really loved it. I thought it was great. I love what they're doing with the Judgment Day. So Finn, we come into this promo and Finn's already talking and he says, JD's been really stepping up lately. Maybe it's time we bring him into Judgment Day officially. And Damien goes ahead and says, I still think he needs to prove himself. I do get that he's your boy, but I think he needs to prove himself. And Finn goes, I agree, but we may not have the tag team championships if it wasn't for him helping us at Payback. And Dom goes, I'm cool with whatever you guys try to decide. I just want to remain neutral. And Rhea goes ahead and says, let's see how he goes with Sami Zayn tonight. Finn, just make sure that he's ready. And Finn goes, consider it done. Damien, do you want to help me out? And Damien goes, yeah, sure, why not? And then they leave, and then Dom looks like he's about to leave and follow in suit. Rhea kind of holds Dominic back because he looks like he's about to walk off, and she goes ahead and says, Dom, I just need you to ensure that everything with JD McDonough goes to plan, and we'll talk about that other thing later. Then we end up having the match between Chelsea Green and Raquel Rodriguez. Now, this was a very short match. It was very much shown to, put on display Raquel's dominance within the ring. So from the very beginning of the match, Chelsea tries to run out, but then Raquel ends up grabbing her and starts to ragdoll Chelsea. Raquel ends up hitting Chelsea with a big boot, and then she throws Chelsea, and Chelsea kind of tries to go into a high-flying move. It's like a crossbody, and then Raquel ends up catching her. Chelsea ends up slapping Raquel. Raquel hits her with a clothesline and then a Tahana bomb, and she ends up taking away the win. Then it's confirmed that there will be a rematch between Rhea and Raquel next week on Monday Night Raw, but Dominic Mysterio is actually barred from ringside, which I think is very clever. Then we go into a backstage segment with the Alpha Academy, and Chad Gable's talking about how, a guy like me apparently doesn't deserve to be in the history books, but if anything, I already am, valedictorian, I'm an Olympian, I've done all of this stuff. And he goes ahead and says, tonight I get to add one more thing to my legacy. And he says that your desire to keep that title means less than my desire to win. Then we see Drew McIntyre's backstage looking for Kofi Kingston after what happened in their tag match, and he ends up quickly talking with Jey Uso, and he basically just says, he knows how to deal with these issues, and if he's going to have these issues arise again, he's going to come to Cody. And then ends up seeing backstage, he finds, Kofi, and they're quickly chatting back and forth. And they're obviously having some massive disagreements. And then Riddle and Kofi are like, I don't know what's going on with Drew. And then Kofi's like, well, maybe you should go talk to your tag team partner. Then we had a Miz TV segment. Now, Miz kind of comes out and starts saying, welcome to Miz TV. And he says, at Payback, I was robbed and exposed LA Knight for who he truly is. But my guest is going to make things right. My guest is going to be very transparent. And he goes ahead and says, my guest is John Cena. John Cena's music hits, crowd goes absolutely crazy, but John Cena doesn't come out for his entrance. And Stu, the cameraman, is kind of looking and he's like, well, where is he? He starts doing those camera movements where he follows John Cena during his entrance and does them all the way up into the ring. And it kind of is set up in a way that we're making fun of the fact that sometimes we think that John Cena can't be seen. And, The Miz makes it look like, John Cena's sat down and goes ahead and says, you screwed me over at Payback. And he says it feels weird because, he's trying to interact with the crowd. And he goes, it feels weird because you You can't really see him, can you? He's right here. And he goes, for 18 years, I've been able to see right through you as well as work with you. And he goes ahead and says, did LA Knight pay you to have him win that match? Did he purposely come in to screw me over? And the Miz starts talking about, you know, how John Cena needs to get out of the ring, and ends up hitting this like skull-crushing finale, but obviously no one's there, so he mimics the skull-crushing finale, which was quite funny. And the Miz goes ahead and says, let me be clear, there's nothing imaginary about Payback. And he's going to challenge LA Knight to a one-on-one match with no stipulations, nothing special, no special treatment, and says his success is as real as the John Cena that you see in this ring today, and says that this fairy tale will crash and burn because of me. Then we see a video package that's obviously built up from a lot of Gunther's previous matches, and obviously the interactions he's been having with Chad Gable in the lead up to this match. Now, if Gunther retains the title during the main event, he becomes the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion of all time. Then we see that Jey Uso is walking backstage and he runs into Adam Pearce, and they're quickly having a catch up, and we end up finding out that because Jey Uso has been traded from SmackDown to Raw, somebody from Raw is going to be traded over to SmackDown. And then Adam Pearce just comes in and says, like, I just wanted to let you know before you find out from anybody else, that is what is going to happen, so just be prepared for that. And then Jey Uso walks off, and Tommaso Ciampa comes in and goes, hey, Adam, is this a good time for us to continue our conversation? And Adam Pearce is like, yeah, sure, come on in. So very intrigued to see where that goes, because you guys know how much I love Tommaso Ciampa and how I want so much more for him on the main roster than what he's getting. Then we had the match between JD McDonough and Sami Zayn. Now, there was a beautiful starting sequence in this match. Sami ends up slamming JD into the corner of the ring, which honestly sounded so incredibly painful when I heard it. It was just crazy. JD ends up chopping Sami a few times, but Sami ends up reversing it and ends up chopping JD as well too. So Sami throws JD over the ring ropes, which actually, I'm not going to lie, the landing on that looked pretty bad. And then JD ends up bouncing Sami Zayn off the commentary table and then into the side of the ring post. Then we hit the commercial break, and after the commercial break, Sami Zayn's turned the entire match around and ends up attacking JD McDonough. Sami ends up hitting a really nice clothesline on JD as well too. And Sami ends up hitting JD McDonough with a really nice Michinoku driver, which I was like, so incredible. Michael Cole, you could hear his reactions on commentary. He was completely losing his mind. Sami ends up hitting a really nice exploder suplex onto JD, and he sets up the haluva kick when Dominic Mysterio pulls JD out of the ring. So at first I was kind of like, why is he pulling him out of the ring? What, does he not want him to win? But he's obviously pulling him out of the ring because Sami's about to hit his finishing move. And Sami ends up distracting Dominic Mysterio or ends up attacking Dominic Mysterio. And then Dominic ends up trying to distract Sami Zayn, and JD ends up hitting a roll-up. So JD McDonough has won this match. He's proven to the Judgment Day that he should really be a part of the group. After the match, Sami Zayn ends up beating down on Dominic Mysterio and hits him with an exploder suplex. Tries to follow it up by the haluva kick. But then JD ends up grabbing Sami Zayn before he can go and start running for the haluva kick, and throws him into the ring steps. Tells Dominic Mysterio, goes back into the ring, and he says, hey, you gotta go. Then Sami ends up hitting JD with the haluva kick. So it's interesting to see that Dominic Mysterio didn't really want to go back and help JD, but JD's willing to put his life on the line for the Judgment Day. Then we ended up seeing the interview segment that Becky Lynch had after the Payback match, and obviously Tiffany's interruption. I feel like this is really teasing that match that we may see at some point in time between the two of them. I'm a massive Becky Lynch fan, and I'm slowly becoming a really big fan of Tiffany Stratton, so I do think that this match would be really good. The promos would be great. I feel like this is a really good way to add some validity to Tiffany as a wrestler, and obviously if Becky's going to put her over, Becky's going to put her over. Then we see that the Judgment Day is backstage, and they're all talking about how impressive of a win that JD McDonough had. And Finn goes, man, this is an impressive win. And Damien goes, you did all right. And then Finn goes, happy days, let's get out of here. And before they do, Dominic Mysterio kind of walks over towards Jey Uso. And Jey Uso's just standing there. And he goes, well, if it isn't the little homie, And Dominic Mysterio just says, I just wanted to say that we both come from messed up families and we both have Hall of Fame dads. And I just want to say that I feel you and I understand your pain and I understand what you've gone through. And, I went from not having a family to having the tightest family in all of WWE. And Jey Uso goes, you understand how I'm feeling? And Dom goes, yeah, no one likes you. But ever since, Judgment Day and Mami came into my life, they showed me that there's no leaders and that everybody's equal. And, maybe I'll talk to Judgment Day and I'll see if we can get you in. And, Judgment Day's always got open arms and just go away and think about it. So could we see Jey Uso join the Judgment Day as well too? Or is this just a case of they're both kind of bonding on the trauma that they've had? Now it's time for the main event. It is the Intercontinental Championship match between Chad Gable and Gunther. Straight away from the start, this was made to feel like a big fight feel because of the fact that if Gunther wins this match, he's the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion of all time, beating Honky Tonk Man's record of 35 years. Straight away, I instantly knew this was going to be a clinical classic, and they did not prove me wrong throughout this entire match. So it started off with some really awesome sequences. Gable's trying to get the lead on Gunther straight away, ends up hitting him with some chops and then a drop kick. Then it hits the commercial break. After the commercial break, Chad has got Gunther wrapped around in the ropes by the ring post and ends up dropping down onto Gunther. Gunther hits Chad Gable with a really nice big boot and ends up hitting him with a few big chops, and then Chad Gable ends up reversing and hits some of his big chops of his own. Gunther ends up grabbing Chad Gable and torturing him on the top rope, which is then followed by another commercial. One thing that really got to me during this match is the commercials were very much taking me out of it because I couldn't see what was going on in between, and I kind of very much had to piece everything together, but it's totally fine. So after the commercial break, Chad and Gunther end up going outside of the ring, and then Chad hits Gunther with a German suplex. Gunther ends up able to put Chad Gable into a powerbomb, and Gunther goes up to the top rope, but then Chad Gable ends up meeting him there. Gunther's hitting Chad with a couple of chops, which drops him back down. Chad Gable goes back up and ends up hitting a really nice superplex onto Gunther. And Chad ends up hitting a headbutt splash onto Gunther as well too, going straight into that ankle lock on Gunther a couple of times, but Gunther ends up reversing them as well too. And Gunther does this he reverses the German suplex as well too, which was really nice to see. Then Chad Gable ends up hitting the Chaos Theory on Gunther, tries to hit a moonsault, but Gunther ends up getting a knee up. And then Gunther ends up hitting Chad Gable with a really, really crisp lariat clothesline, which ends up taking the win. So Gunther is the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion of all time. Not even of the modern era anymore, quite literally of all time. And there was a sign the entire time that was being held up in the crowd that says greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time, and I could not agree more. It was referenced on commentary that he became the Intercontinental Champion of June of last year. We're in September of 2023. It's just incredible. I'm so happy that Gunther is the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion. As I said before, beating the Honky Tonk Man's record of 35 years. Insane. I'm so excited to see where Gunther goes next, how much longer he holds the title for when he gets moved up to the main event. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Monday Night Raw this week. As I said at the beginning, it was a really fun episode. If you stay till the end of this recap, thank you so much for listening to all of my thoughts. I know sometimes they can come across a bit frazzled, but honestly, I just love Monday Night Raw so much. If you like what we do on the channel, make sure you go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on those post notifications so you can see every time we upload a new video. Also, go down to the description to find our personal Instagrams and TikToks so you can keep up to date with what we're doing when we're not posting on the channel. Make sure you go ahead and follow the Outcasted TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram so you can keep up to date with clips from previous podcasts, special content that we make, and also keep up to date with when we're going to be putting out podcasts. We've got a regular uploading schedule this week, so the NXT review will be coming from Reese. Then we'll have a podcast later on in the week, followed by the SmackDown review and potentially an AEW review. That is still to be determined. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this, make sure you go ahead and follow us on our socials and so you can stay a part of the journey. I'll catch you guys in the podcast. Bye guys.